Hey, what's up, guys? This book, oh, man, I had gotten this book a while ago. The only reason I knew it existed was because of Rue Morgue, looking through their book review section. So Rue Morgue does have its uses, and you know, in addition to being fodder for me. Yeah, this was a really good Hippocampus Press, of course. Joshi writes an article in it, and it was a nice overview. Critical essays. Once you hear critical, you know you're in trouble, right? But there was actually a lot of decent ones in here. I don't have to buy everything that is being sold by the writer of the essay. I like to take what I think is useful and leave the rest. You know? And because he's is not necessarily greater than its parts, I'd say. But I checked off some of the ones I liked the best. This Vincent Starrett article seems to have been written like contemporary. So this is like from, I think, the early 1900s. But the whole thing with Machen, right? Obviously, the Weird Tale, his works, very influential on Lovecraft, right? Our guy. The Machen's theme of trying to get beyond the appearance, the reality, getting lifting the veil, getting a glimpse of what's behind the veil, which I always mention frequently as a theme. The idea of the reality beyond, the truth beyond what you see in front of you, and I argue that's what the higher levels of horror expound, right? The existentialism, right? And you see the term "lifting the veil" used frequently in these essays. So I'll go and just go over just a couple of them. I don't want to make this too long. I got a lot of work to do still. The pagan. Of course, the man was a Anglo-Catholic. I never read The Hill of Dreams. I really want to see this now. One of the most decadent books ever written by a man who was pretty much a conservative. Personally, he loved his first wife dearly and lost her just like Poe did, just like I did. But from this earlier hieroglyphics, the title. I like what was in this essay. They reprinted some of what he wrote. Only this, right? The reality is always above actuality. That all things, from the most abstract to the most concrete, are involved in this mystery, and that no mere making of the external shape will be our art. No voracious document will be our truth, but to us, initiated, the symbol will be offered, and we shall take the sign and adore. Beneath the outward and perhaps unlovely accidents, the very presence and internal indwelling of God, right? The seeking of it. Very interesting. Of course, he was in the Golden Dawn, that the Mystic Society with Crowley and others, for a time. Apparently, all these guys fell out with each other. What a surprise! Once again, beyond the veil, right? I like this work here in this essay by this writer from the past here. Of Hawthorne, Arthur Symons wrote, those are two authors I like a lot. He is haunted, in reference to Hawthorne, what is obscure, dangerous, and on the confines of good and evil. Machen crosses those perilous frontiers. He all but lifts the veil. Okay? Now, interesting. And of course, him and M.P. Shield are most associated with decadence, next to, of course, Mr. Wilde. But they weren't really influenced like Wilde was by the French as much as by, of course, Poe, which is brought up and makes things later, right? But I like here how he also brings up what Machen had said himself. In terms of, he wants to invoke ecstasy. You know how Lovecraft talks about atmosphere. He wants to invoke ecstasy, or if you prefer, beauty, wonder, awe, right? Mystery, sense of the unknown, desire for the unknown, the longing, right? Goethe talked about the ancient Greeks saw the universe with a sense of awe. And that's kind of what he's trying to get across. I like how this stuff links together. It's also interesting, too. This thing written about Machen was written back then by the... So it's... I like how he mentions here as a side note. We are going to be asked, post-mortem, why we allowed Ambrose Bierce to vanish from our midst unnoticed and unsought after ignoring him shamelessly throughout his career. Just thought it was an interesting callback to another writer who I'm a fan of. And this man is basically, in this essay, saying to appreciate this man and another great writer, Chesterton. It's interesting. Just real quick with this essay, one of the things that I like about Machen that parallels myself, I guess, is it's about me, right? But all that aside, he grew up in the Welsh hills, right? Very beautiful places, very mystical places. Roman ruins were there when they were occupied almost 2,000 years ago for a time. But he made his way into the city of London. Okay, so here's a man in between two worlds, literally, geographically. London, of course, crime, prostitution, scouring poverty, like Jack London had written about, mass unemployment. He was in the middle of all that, and he had a kind of liked the city also, but he also loved the countryside, the Welsh countryside he was from. So he got to see the dark, the mystery that you even have in the city, at least that you had in the city back then. I just thought it was interesting. The, this one here about the city. There's one thing here too about how he liked to have a nice beer with his mates, right? And even like he savored the old architecture. See, there's a lot about Machen that I like because it's essentially myself, without the talent, of course. Talking about hanging out in his taverns, right? Warm dark rooms, wood fires, right? Meats and ales. His love of ale, quality ale, was shared by many of his compatriots. Reminds me of C.S. Lewis. Also, they liked that British ale by the warm fire with friends talking. Really it conjures up. Really, I don't know. I like that image as well. So, of course, the big thing is the book in yellow, right? How Dorian inspired Lucian, a character in the book I have not read, the Hill of Dreams, but Machen and Wilde, Oscar Wilde, were contemporaries. They actually dined together several times. Apparently, there was an Italian restaurant in London back then, Florence. Right? Yeah, the Hill of Dreams. And this is an interesting essay. Of course, one of my favorite writers here is brought up, Huysman, right? But in terms of the point of this essay was that everyone thought that the scandal, Oscar Wilde picked a fight and then lost, essentially, in court, right? And what happened, a lot of the publishers were backing off of the decadence, right? The argument here is that it's always assumed that Machen and them did that. Well, you saw the work of M.P. Shield, you saw that this was not the case. But in terms of Machen, after a good year after this scandal, he starts writing this Hill of Dreams book, which is considered one of the most decadent books written in English, which I have not read. Right? Of course, there's the Yellow Book. The King in Yellow is a play on decadence. If you remember, Robert W. Chambers was in Paris, and I think The King in Yellow was sort of like an in-joke towards the Yellow Book and that whole scene there. Right? This essay too, right? It was pretty cool. It showed that Machen did not back off from writing. If anything, he wrote his most decadent work after the scandals, right? In the Hill of Dreams, one of the most decadent novels of the period, the most decadent novel in all of English literature. Wow, I haven't read this. Of course, you have a little like the Latin cadir, right? To fall, right? A Montesquieu, and the term decadence, which is right when the decadent poets. If you say that, someone who knows of the history of poetry will know you are referring to the late Roman period, the empire rotting, simultaneous rotting of its cultural life, its military might. By the fin de soleil, both implication of the word proved useful to account for avant-garde cultural productions. Now, I don't agree with the author. He says it was a progressive sort of movement. It was what I say horror is. It's like I'm talking to Rue Morgue back then. But he makes some good points here, right? Yeah, well, that's a great, but the symbolist movement in literature, more on that later, so I only have so much time. But it was interesting showing that Machen, the very conservative Machen, was not backing off from it. And actually, he actually lists titles more decadent stuff for me to check out. Interesting. Being done after the death, not the death, the trial of Oscar Wilde, right? Showing that the perception a century later was not what really happened. Just saying. This is also an interesting essay here, Panic Fears, where he brings up the 1890s, right? A special period in the history of England from an artistic and literary viewpoint, right? The last decade of the Victorian age. And they bring up more and more people felt the civilization, or at least Western civilization, had passed its zenith and was now in decline. One of the most influential books of the decade was Max Nordau's Degeneration. Right? And of course, World War One didn't help. Right? And of course, my man here, Oswald Spain, came out with Decline of the West. Okay? And it's always funny too because you still have people, but you'll read essays from decades ago, 50 years ago, but even now, people saying there was a perception that there was a decline in Western civilization. You know, people think it's declining now, but my argument is I keep saying that this thing was already going down in this 1800s, 19th century period. Of course, its impact on Lovecraft needs we don't even talk about it. I like here too, right? Machen sided resolutely with the Francoist insurgents and against the legitimate Republican government. Yeah, my man. Anyway, this is probably my favorite one. One of them, The Abyss of All Being. I mean, the death of metaphysics. Now, it's interesting to bring up what is it? Guillermo the Bull, right? Not a fan. In an intro to this, I think I actually have this edition of Evil is Never Dormant, it gestates. Right? Of course, the very duality view of these bourgeois Marxist, Guillermo del Toro, and also overrated filmmaker. All right, enough. I like the idea that, referring to the great god Pan, right? They lifted the veil of reality, and you saw what the ancients called the great god Pan, this evil. But was it evil? Okay? To a modern secularist person who is derived from Christianity, or is a heresy of Christianity, if you want to say that, it's all good or evil. But the pagan, the ancient person, would understand, right? There's room for both sorcery and sanctity, right? That's from the white people, Machen's white people. There's room for both sorcery and sanctity, true evil and true good, and each is an ecstasy, and each is contained in the same, right? That's my so. But it's interesting that in this essay here, there was this fear of. I love this. Right? The fin de say, the more disturbing to the fin de say mind, right? The transcendent evil, namely nothing, right? Nihilism. Okay, the materialist has stripped away the spiritual world entirely. I always like how they mention these things as well. This is how they looked at it, but now we sort of know that this is what has happened. And there's this Victorian obsession with degeneration, right? The dread that the evolutionary process might turn backwards and result in de-evolution. You've been to Walmart lately? You've been on the subway lately? I haven't. You crazy? In terms of just wrapping this up, I like the here, right? This is a pretty good writing on the part of the writer here, right? Evil in the world, the great god Pan, is not any religious formulation of devil god or devil god. Devil god or devil god. What is this? Rob Zombie saw. But rather an encounter with something more horrifying than the devil himself. A world without the devil, without God, without anything beneath the tapestry of nature. This is the pure cosmic horror that lies at the core of so many of the best weird tales. True that. Alright. So, right, Dhammacara, right, is the fear of an empty cosmos indifferent to human existence. Now, Lovecraft takes that to that level, right? That's why we talk about it, right? The horror of an anti-metaphysical reality, right? He has the soul of a mystic, but the mind of an atheist, one who could not bear the possibility that there might be nothing beyond the abyss of all being. I like that writing. You live in this world now. Okay, you live in this world now. I always argue that there might be nothing, right? The possibility is there, but the possibility is only the possibility. There could be something. There could be nothing. The mystery comes in. You'll never know. And the ancients would be like, "What's the problem?" Later.